All right. We're doing another special split episode of the Fuzz Club. We're talking about the Sorceress album, Beneath the Mountain. And we are lucky to have Liam Neighbors on this podcast. Blake here as well. Welcome, guys. Excited to talk about this one.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. So I tried to listen to your interview with Cave Dweller, but my Spotify was being odd and kept stopping every few minutes and just not playing anything. So I didn't get too far into that. So for anybody that doesn't know or know the story, and I'm one of those people, I don't know too much about it. Tell us about kind of the history of Sorceress, what happened to this album, why it's being re-released now, why the band was no longer after that album was created. Just give us a little bit of like history on some of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, totally. I might take those in a roundabout order. I think first and foremost, the reason that Beneath the Mountain is being reissued is because since its creation, a couple of the members, including myself and my close friend Matt Williams, have gone on to make the projects called Hell and Mizmor that have gained a decent amount of traction in the extreme underground metal scene. And so now there's been the opportunity and the interest from the audience and also record labels to delve into our past work, because actually we've been in bands together for like 15 years now or so. And also our other close friend, Andrew Black, who is a live member of both of these projects, Hell and Mizmor, was also in this band Sorceress with us. And I've been playing in bands with him for close to 20 years now. So really our most current and extreme endeavors are just kind of the tip of the iceberg of a really long musical relationship and friendships that we have going on here, and people have become interested through Hell and Mizmor mostly, I think. Sorceress, I guess you could say, formed in 2008. The album originally released in 2009. But all four of the members, that's Andy, Matt, myself, and our friend Blake Farron, we were in a band together previous to Sorceress called Love Machine. And Love Machine was kind of a little bit more of a rock and roll version of what Sorceress became. And we only made one album, and the last song on that album was called Sorceress, and it was a little bit more metal sounding. And we did some soul searching and realized that that was the direction we wanted to take the band, and named the new iteration after the song, and made this stoner rock, stoner doom metal album Beneath the Mountain in 2009. And we mostly played in Salem and in Portland, house shows and clubs and theaters. And the band broke up because, well, lots of different reasons. We were like 18 when the record came out, so it's a awkward transitional time for most folks out there, and lives were just starting to go in different directions. And I can't, I won't speak everyone's piece on this. I know everyone has a different take and a different explanation. But my side of it was I was becoming really religious, actually. And the band was kind of falling apart a little bit already. Matt had left the band, and we had just made a record, so we were trying out a different drummer. And then I moved to Germany for 6 months to go to Bible school, and the band was just kind of on hiatus. And then when I got back, I didn't want to do the band anymore. And for like personal spiritual convictions of sorts. And so we played one last show together with Matt coming back just to do one last hurrah in, I guess, 2011. So you could say 2008 to 2011 was the life of the band, but a lot of that was spent in suboptimal conditions. And really, the record we made in 2009 is the one thing, one real thing we did.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been really cool to have that get attention. It's just been a lot of fun to remember that and have it fully realized 14 years later.
Sure. It kind of seems like every time you start a new project, it gets heavier and more extreme than the last. Is that fairly accurate?
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
So how does it feel now that this album is getting kind of reissued to like go back down memory lane and think about music in that same time period? Do you have some part of you that goes like, oh, I still dig that kind of music. I could go back and do some more of that. Or are you still just like full on heavy extreme, from here on out?
I definitely still dig that kind of music. I don't know that I would make it again myself. A weird thing for me has been making the transition from being a singer to screaming and going back to singing and trying to like do a style that I was doing when I was 18. I don't even know if I could do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's interesting listening back to the record because I'm definitely still proud of it. We did the songs. I think the songs are well written. I think the performances are good. I think we took the time and attention to detail to have it engineered properly and have good quality artwork, which were things that our bands in the past, when we were 15, 16, 17, those things weren't really there. They were evolving. So I feel like this was the first time we made something that was like professional, but we were just a small group of kids in Salem where the music scene is really tiny and people pretty much don't make it out. So
Yeah.
only, 100 to 200 people probably ever heard our band when we were active. But when I listen back to it, I hear lots of things I like about it, and then obviously in context of who I am now as a musician, I have things that I think about, like, oh, if only we had tuned down a little bit, or slowed this part down a little bit more. But that's just my perspective. In the moment in the band, there were other people that didn't want to get extreme. And so it was, doom metal balanced against like rock and roll and psych.
Yeah.
And it was all of our personalities and not just mine. So yeah, I hear some things like that where I'd be like, oh, it'd just be so much heavier if we were at least one step down. But we were 18, and I think the record's really great in the context of 2009 and the bands we were listening to and what we were trying to do with that.
What kind of stuff were you listening to in 2009?
We were listening to a lot of Witch, The Sword, Witchcraft, Donovan, Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin, and even like extreme stuff. I was listening to Burning Witch and Wolves in the Throne Room, and Earth and Bongzilla and all that kind of stuff by then. So it was just a big melting pot of all the influences we had, kind of skewed on the heavier side of things, but not going like full on, like no blast beats, no screaming, like still kind of fun and stony and not dark and sad as much.
Yeah.
I was curious about some of the lyrical themes on this album, because you've talked a lot about, especially in Mizmor, about kind of how that started as a way of talking about a crisis with faith, and then kind of your journey throughout that. In reading some of the the press release around this album, I saw that kind of the lyrical themes are really inspired by Lord of the Rings mythology and Christianity. And so I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that and kind of what that process was, what you guys were trying to say at the time, if you were trying to say anything at the time, because you were a teenager. Yeah,
good question. Back then I was really uncomfortable with being clear and being knowable, and I wanted everything to be veiled in symbolism, almost to the point of like being nonsense to someone else that's reading it. And I don't know why I felt that way, and I write lyrics completely differently now, where I have a specific message or idea that I want the listener to understand and take away and digest. But back then, I think I was just embarrassed about what I was saying, or in some way or another. So that's, I think, where the heavy, like, fantasy lore kind of allegorical vibe comes in, because I really didn't want to just talk about my life, because I didn't think it was very interesting, but I still wanted to share. And I think a big reason for that is that, like with Mizmor, I went through like a personal tragedy and like a really dark time in my life. And that gave me a lot of inspiration and kind of the ability to be vulnerable with it, I think. But back when we were doing Sorceress, I mean, I was writing songs about drug trips, romances, and just straight up fantasy. So there's stuff from my life woven in there, lots of relationship stuff, and just like teenage psychedelia. And some of it is just purely fantasy. And I don't think I had gone through enough real life hardship yet to write more authentic lyrics and want to be transparent about what I'm writing. So Sorceress was more of a fun approach, I think, where like I was using moods and stories from my life, but dressing them up in like, I mean, aren't wizards and swords and stuff fun? Like,
Yeah.
maybe there's a way that this is also about that, you know, but we don't have to get so serious or boring or clear about it. We can just be in a fantasy and rock.
Yeah, definitely.
Do you ever miss that kind of thing where like you're making music now that's very personal? Do you ever miss just throwing a song out there about something fun and fantastical?
Oddly enough, I don't.
No. Not even now that we're going down memory lane with Sorceress and re-releasing and all that kind of stuff. You don't.
It's
go,
it's
"Boy,
fun.
That was a lot easier making fun stuff that had nothing to do with me.
Well,
On the outside.
yeah. Well, it was, but
Yeah.
that's just not who I am right now. So I don't think it would be easy. I think if I sat down and tried to do that, I'd be like, this is not working. This is stupid or not natural for me right now. But it was natural for me then. So I like that it's a part of my life, but I don't know that I could write like that. It might be an interesting challenge, actually, to just one day try to write a song about something made up, something else that doesn't have to do with me at all. But yeah, it's just a different time and place for me, I think.
You mentioned coming out in Salem and kind of a small scene there. What was the reception to this album when it came out? Was there much? Was there anything?
Yeah, I mean, as far as Salem goes, people liked us a lot. We would play with a handful of the local bands that there were, many of which also contained one or more of our members. And we'd play at the, like, you know, sometimes there was only one venue in town. Sometimes there were three. And, you know, that's kind of what you're looking at, a small downtown area with like a really small group of like alt kids. But there was kind of a special time and place thing to Salem back then. For instance, now there's a much even smaller music scene. And I think it'd be a lot harder growing up there now as a creative person trying to find other people your age that are like-minded to kind of be angsty with. But for Salem, there actually was a bubbling little music scene when I was growing up there. So, I mean, the reception was, you know, everyone loved everyone's band, and no one took anything very seriously. So I don't think there was, the type of reception that's like, wow, these guys are going to go far. I think it's just like, this is our city's, stoner band, and we're here for it.
What was the kind of the turning point for like Mizmor and Hell and stuff like that? Then after that started getting more and more traction, and kind of seeing Sorceress in the rear view more.
Yeah, that was interesting. Hell was starting as Sorceress was ending. And also, for Matt, that was a project that was born of traumatic life circumstances. And I think everyone was just kind of starting to get darker as real things were starting to happen in life as we were growing up. And Matt got taken under the wing of a really small underground label called Pesanta Urfolk that is no longer around. Through relationships with our friends in Salem, Paul Riedel, Nate Myers, Kyle Watson, these guys are a few years older than us, and they lived at this house in Salem called the Burial Grounds, or the BG. And whereas Sorceress and my group of friends were kind of from like the regular Salem music scene, and we were a more metal band in that group, there was a really, really small subset of extreme metal bands that would only play house shows. And if you had to know, if you knew, you knew. And these were friends we also grew up with. And at some point, Matt started getting really close with them, and he was exposed to a bunch of new music and kind of took his stab at doing their thing. And everyone was really floored when he showed them the first couple Hell songs. And so through their scene and connections and relationships, Hell started getting shown to more people, and eventually he worked with a small record label, and then I became a member of the live band, and we toured around, and I had just started Mizmor, and then the same process kind of rippled out for me. I would bring some Mizmor stuff on Hell tours, and slowly over time people just started to care about our bands, and that felt really good, but also really surprising, because you just work for years and years and years at something before anyone takes you seriously or cares about what you're doing. So I felt like there was a lot of luck and circumstance involved, that we were still talented people, the same talented people, but for some reason we've finally found a group of people that liked this iteration of our music, and that was really cool.
I was curious about kind of if you could go into a little of the story of kind of refinding some of these recordings, because I was reading that you had to contact the original engineer to get them. Could you kind of go into that a little bit?
Yeah, totally. So, for the last 14 years, we've had just the original digital master of the record we made. We recorded and had it mixed and mastered all by the same guy, Edgar McRae. And when we went to do the vinyl, I just imagined, like, he still does some engineering, but like he has other jobs too. And like, I just imagined for some reason incorrectly that if I were to ask him, hey, you still have those unmastered mixes from 14 years ago? He would be like, what? No. So I just kind of like auto summarized in my head that like, well, we'll be doing the vinyl remaster off the digital master, and it'll be cool, but there won't be as much headroom and ability for the mastering engineer to push it, because it already has compression and limiting on it. And then I thought, well, I should just try. So I hit Edgar up, and he was like, I know I have them, but I don't know where they are. They're on a hard drive somewhere, and it might take me a while, but like I keep everything, so I should have them. And yeah, he found them, and then we got to get the original mixes remastered, and it sounds amazing. And we kind of had a similar experience with our artwork. Our friend Kento painted a few paintings for us for the album originally, and we got like a bad scan of them that like altered the color, and that's what we used 14 years ago. And then I did a small run reissuing the CD for the first time in 2020 for Mizmor fans, and all I had was the original CD to make my new artwork off of. So it just keeps getting more and more reduced and shitty. And we're like, well, if we're going to do a vinyl, we have to figure this out. So again, contacted the artist, and Kento got me the paintings, and I got good scans of them and got them in there. And like it looks just like how it's supposed to. The audio and visual elements are both like actually right finally.
Yeah. What was the process with hitching on with King Volume for this release? Like, you know, because I know you recently switched labels for Mizmor, correct?
Correct.
Correct. Yeah. And so what was it kind of like in terms of, did Todd reach out to you? Did you reach out to him? How did all that work?
Yeah, Todd's just a good friend. I've known him since the very beginning of Mizmor. I met him on a Hell tour when we were on tour with a band called Drought from New Mexico, and Todd lived really close to them and was good friends with them and had done a bunch of artwork for them. So he just came on the tour. And we hit it off. He did some artwork for Mizmor, actually the first bit of commissioned art ever he did for me. And we've just been in touch ever since. He has a really ripping band now called Heretical Sect. And I knew about King Volume that he released like stoner, psych, and like classic doom kind of stuff. And I kind of wanted the Sorceress record to come out at some point on vinyl, just for like mine and Matt's committed fans that like it, you know, just a small run because it is well done. And I had talked about it with Gilead, but Adam didn't have enough time for like an old album like that, which is totally understandable. So I approached Todd. I think I could be remembering that wrong, but it was just casual. Just threw out the idea, thinking that he would say no, but he was actually interested in it, and it's a good fit for his label. So it was pretty cool.
We've seen a lot of old music brought back to life in recent years with like the brown acid stuff, and I think they're doing like a heavy metal version of that now. And then there's old little gems like this, and we've talked about a couple of them on the podcast. Wicked Lady was like one of our recent episodes that we did, and now, you know, we're talking about Sorceress and how wasn't unheard of necessarily, but kind of being brought back into light. You know, there's a kind of a booming stoner scene happening, and there's a lot of old music that can get a lot of new fans, whether it's 50 years old or whether it was 10 years old. Do you have any other old stuff that might see the light of day sometime, even prior to Sorceress or anything?
Probably not. I mean, yes, I have old stuff, but I think Sorceress is the first thing that is worth showing people that we still, you know, that I still feel good about. I have used recordings that are almost as old in Mizmor in different ways, but yeah, I don't think any, like the Love Machine album or Matt's and my band before that, even Sun Marine, I don't think we'll ever release that to the public. It's just,
was Love Machine ever released?
Yeah. We had a CD. I mean, we did the exact same thing Sorceress did. We self-released a CD with art that a friend did. We went to a studio and like we did that one really quick. It's not as well engineered, but you know, it's just Salem local bands. They have a hard time, man. I mean, you cold call a few record labels with your CD, and you get up to Portland to play shows when you can.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're kids and you're in a different city, also, like, a lot of the shows we got were like Battle of the Bands or like sell your own tickets kinds of shows when we went to Portland. So
Yeah.
it was just it wasn't meant to be for people that young, but it was fun.
Yeah.
As someone, so especially most of you guys are either active or have been active for quite a while in music and have really made names for yourselves. Was there any type of just kind of second thoughts about re-releasing this on vinyl and kind of taking your work from when you were a teenager and kind of bringing it back into the consciousness?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's definitely a little bit of discomfort with going that far back, and also showing people that I know are here for really extreme music, something that's a lot lighter. Yeah, there's definitely some discomfort there, but ultimately, I think it's worth doing. So that's what we're doing.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, I mean, kind of like what we talked about at the beginning, like most of us in the band now, if we remade this record, we would do a decent amount of things differently. But that would also totally change it, right? So it's kind of this like time capsule. It's locked in time with who we were then, the gear choices, the tone choices we liked then. And I think that gives it a charm. And I think it sounds cool, but it's just different.
We've also seen a lot of older bands that have been out of commission for maybe even 20 years. Lowrider, Astro Queen, some of those coming back and getting back together, doing shows, making new records. Was there any talk at all of kind of reforming Sorceress and playing a couple shows or releasing new music or even thinking about doing anything like that?
We've definitely kicked around the idea about playing, not new music, but just doing some sort of reunion, even if it was at a house show or something, just for us, just to have fun and just be nostalgic and just play the songs one more time.
Sure.
We don't have any interest, I don't think, in being much more public about that, trying to make a comeback or anything.
What if this record just explodes and becomes the next big thing in Stoner Rock?
I mean, never say never, right? Like, but I think this works well being a memory.
Cool.
And we're not going to make like a bunch of new merch or anything. It's the record, and like maybe at some point we'll get in the room and play the songs together, and some people will be there. But I don't know. It could also not happen, and I'd be fine with that, because again, I don't want to sing. I don't want to sing these songs that 18-year-old me sang. But also I love those people a lot, and I love those songs and playing with them. So yeah, I don't know.
Fair enough.
I'd definitely be here for it. So
Thank you.
I guess my final question is, you mentioned that you were doing things differently with like gear and things like that. Were you using you were the bassist and vocalist, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So what kind of propelled you to move, in those kind of years in between Mizmor and Sorceress, to go from singing and playing bass to doing everything and screaming?
Yeah. Well, I've always done everything. I've been making full-length solo albums with all the instruments and releasing them, however small or DIY of a release it may be, since the 6th grade. And Mizmor just became the newest version of that. The style always changes over the years, but I've always had a need to get thoughts and feelings out in music in a non-collaborative way. Just doing everything track by track. I've just been doing that like my whole life. So and playing in bands, kind of running in parallel to that process for me. So that's been a constant in my life, and bands have come and gone. So I just continued on doing my thing, and it just got darker, based on necessity, and also based on just what I liked. And it seemed a really natural progression for me to start screaming and make more extreme music. That's kind of the direction I wanted to take Sorceress in anyway, to get more and more extreme over time. So yeah, I mean, as far as gear goes, I didn't really know anything back when we made Sorceress, and we were all just doing what we thought sounded good. And I started out with a cheap PV bass, and during the band I got my Rickenbacker, which is the bass I still use for Mizmor recordings and live Mizmor. And I also got, near the end of that band, the bass Big Muff distortion pedal, which I still have and is the pedal I use for all the guitars and bass on every Mizmor record. So a lot of the gear stuff, like, at least for me, I've done a bunch of experimentation at this point just because why not? But a lot of the stuff is just like circumstance and luck again, like it's what you have, and you try to make all the different kinds of sounds that it can do, and see what sticks. And then when you go to do your next project, what are you going to use? Whatever you have, right? So it's kind of just been a natural evolution for me, in that sense. And maybe I just lucked out with some sounds that I already like. But there was a guitar pedal on the record that, like, when we listen to now, we don't like, but we had no tone zone game yet. Like, we were just so young, we weren't exposed to enough things yet, and we just used the stuff we had. And also I think that's a cool quirk that any record has, honestly.
Yeah.
They're just such little slices of life and identity at any given point in time. That's really fascinating.
Yeah, gear and pedals and effects and all that stuff are so big. I mean, particularly in stoner rock and stuff, and I'm sure in some of the other extreme forms of metal. But to have a record that maybe it wasn't such a big deal at all, didn't play much of a part in it, I think is actually pretty cool. And it probably shows a lot of people that you're overthinking it.
That's an interesting point. Yeah, we were definitely much more focused on composition.
Yeah,
and enough tone contemplation to make sure that the compositional idea comes through to the listener. But there was no, like, which amp do we use? There's we get all these options. Let's make sure that we try every single one and reamp it, and at the end, and try every pedal and all that stuff. That was not in our minds whatsoever. It was just having fun, writing songs and trying to make them sound pretty okay.
Yeah. I'm just for my own curiosity, and I don't know how much this has to do with Sorceress at all necessarily, but how does finding religion and becoming religious play into extreme and really dark music? How does that work for you?
Yeah, this has been kind of the central point to my project Mizmor. The finding of religion, not so much. The losing of religion, which happened to me subsequently after diving in really deep, was traumatizing, to put it succinctly. I was indoctrinated into Christianity since I was a baby. And then, when I was a younger teen, I didn't care about it so much, but never, like, completely wrote it off. And then when I was a late teen, early 20s, I had, like, a powerful conversion experience and, like, took on the religion as an adult for myself. And that's when I got really deep into it, and my life did a total 180, and slowly over the next couple years that eroded, and it hit me with a tremendous loss. It really turns your world upside down. So that's where the darkness and the extreme outlet comes in, just like grieving, processing, getting personal therapy, and just getting the negative out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's been fascinating to watch kind of your careers that's evolved all the way from Sorceress to Cairn and Wits End, and especially reading like the lyrics and how they've changed over the course of the albums is definitely very insightful.
Yeah, it's been a slow, long, gradual process, but from 2012 when the first Mizmor record came out, I was still a struggling Christian, and by the time Cairn came out in 2019, I identified as an atheist, and the 7 years in between that were pretty formless, agnostic, just confused and sad and lost. And so I think the message ultimately is a positive one. I've refound my identity and feel good now, but started as a really heartbroken, confused person. So my music, this artistic process was really helpful to me over the years, and there is a big transition, and you can hear it, but you can more so read it if you're paying attention. So yeah.
So it's especially interesting with like the first Mizmor album, and how at least to my ears, it's a very doomy album with black metal touches, I guess is how I've kind of described it to a lot of people. So, for the people that are listening to this or watching this, who hear Sorceress and say, okay, I like that, I want to see more. I think the first Mizmor album is definitely a great introduction into that.
Hell yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think also a through line for people is the songwriting, because I was the primary songwriter in Sorceress, and it's common in Mizmor and Sorceress, these really long songs that are often linear and kind of tell a story or take you on a journey with a bunch of different movements. You'll find that in both places too. And there is actually a transition album, a really underground transition album between Beneath the Mountain and the first Sorceress record, the first Mizmor record. And that's a tape that I called Yov, which is 2 lost Sorceress songs that I wrote for the band right before we broke up. And I just wanted to document them, so I recorded all the instruments myself. On the same equipment I did the first Mizmor record on. And then one song that I called Mizmor Zero, that's actually a clean song. It's not distorted, but it sounds like it's supposed to be a black metal song. And it was the song I made right before starting Mizmor. So you could listen to Beneath the Mountain, Yov, and the first Mizmor and have that all make sense, and then go through the rest of the discography and be like, okay, I see how we got here.
Can you find Yov? Is that available somewhere?
Yeah,
it's hard to find.
That's on Bandcamp only. It's
Okay.
not on Spotify or Apple Music or anything. And there is a cassette of it. It was released by Grayson Records in 2016. It was sold out for a while, but he just reissued it a few months ago. And I already flew through my copies, but Grayson Records still has copies, and you can listen to the audio on Bandcamp. And I think it'll probably always stay that way, a more cult tape, not as widely distributed, but for any of the true heads that want to dig in, you can find it.
Yeah, it's not a vinyl appearance.
No.
So what's next? What can we expect from you? Anyone that's checking you out for the first time, Sorceress, and going through the discography that way, what can we expect?
Yeah, so Matt's band that Andy and I play in, Hell, we're going on tour March and April, U.S. tour. And then Mizmor, I've got a new record coming out in the summer via Profound Lore Records. And I can't really say too much else about what's going to be going on around that, but keep your eyes peeled in the summer. There will be big things from me later this year.
Awesome.
Hell
Well,
yeah.
is there anything else, Blake or Liam, that you'd like to share with anybody?
Just thanks for coming on.
Yeah, I was going to say thanks for having me and being interested in this. It's been a trip to get to talk to people about this record and have there be interest and whatnot. So just thanks for your time and the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you for joining us on this and giving us the backstory behind all of it. Anybody else that's here checking this out, we're going to start the Fuzz Club episode right after this. All right, this is going to be part 2 of the Sorceress Beneath the Mountain episode, right after the quick discussion with Liam Neighbors. So we'll go around quick, do some introductions, and we'll dive into our talk about Sorceress.
First?
Yeah, sure. Bucky?
All right, Bucky Brown with Doom Charts and just a fanatic of heavy music.
Aawks?
Kris and Randy from the band Aawks. Good to be here.
Eddy?
I'm Eddy from Lords of the Opium Church and the Endless.
And Blake?
Blake from Aiwass.
You son of a bitch. you ruined it.
Start talking.
All right, so we're talking about Sorceress Beneath the Mountain, and I was trying to put this in context of, like, you know, our talk with Liam and why this is an important album and why it's getting some publicity and stuff, and the fact that it came out like 15 years ago and it's getting this reissue, the fact that they went on to do Mizmor and Hell and all that kind of stuff has this other like context around the album. But if you listen to the album just on its own merit, like it just came out yesterday, it's a really, really strong album regardless of all those other external things, I think. So what's everyone else think about Beneath the Mountain?
I've been unbelievably blown away by this thing. I've only gotten a chance to listen to it probably 3 times all the way through. And every time I like it more. And I loved it the first time I heard it. It's like quickly becoming one of my favorite albums of all time.
Oh, shit.
Out here, but like I wanted to kind of dive into it a bit more in the days leading up here, but I also want to savor this album because god damn, like every fucking time I hear it, I'm just blown away. And every single song is like a specific almost EP unto itself. Like the songs are so long and they have so many parts and they're just so well written. Like it just, I think to myself, like, fuck, man. Like I was like, you know, this is the kind of album that makes you want to quit music, but also makes you want to go and write music right away. Like it's just inspiring, and also it's fucking mind blowing how good it is.
Make you feel better or worse that it was done by a bunch of teenagers?
No, it's a mistake, man.
First told me that, man. I
I
was like,
didn't know that, but that makes me feel like a I don't know what, man. But yeah, I can't say enough good about this album. Every time I hear it, like I said, it just gets better and better.
And it's surprising. I mean, maybe not so surprising because maybe the scene wasn't what it was, you know, however long ago. But I don't think that it gets a whole lot of recognition. I don't think a lot of people know about it. I certainly didn't until recently. And, you know, talking to Liam, he said, you know, around their small scene there when it came out, it did fine. People enjoyed it. But like it just doesn't have that like historical context that, you know, other great albums have. And so I think that that's probably why, you know, this reissue is so important. And the individuals of the band went on to do other memorable things that people love. And that's part of why we're talking about it. But it doesn't seem like it has a whole lot of following. I mean, they only did the one album. I guess that's part of it too. But I never knew about this album. I don't think a lot of people did.
Has it been remastered or remixed or something, right?
Yes.
Or is it
Remastered.
So I heard about 30 seconds of the original one, I think, on YouTube, the original mix or master. And then when I heard the current one, it definitely sounds much better now. So I think that might be part of it.
Yeah.
Like everything's popping on this new press. And you can hear everything super clearly. You can feel it all differently. And a well-produced album or the right production on the right album really makes a big difference, I think.
Yeah,
They did.
I do kind of wonder what it sounded like when they first released it, because like Blake said, they were teenagers and it was like kind of their first album. It was the only one from this one. This is long before a lot of their other work. Maybe it sounded like shit. I don't know.
I doubt it did. And I mean, back to what you're all opening up with. I mean, I never heard of this band, and around this time was like I was really into the scene. Like I knew a lot of bands. I was listening to all kinds of heavy, like stoner rock, metal, like this.
Yeah.
And I don't recall coming across this one, but there were some other bands that popped up in my head, just knowing that this was like mid 2000s, and the band that jumped out at me that I was trying to reference was the band Sorceress from New Jersey, I believe they're from. They put out a couple albums turn of the century and then one in 2010 it's like a epic album. Then they never quite got their due either.
But this one came out in 2009, just for reference. I think it came out in 2009.
Yeah.
I don't know if we said that or not, but
it's right around 2009. So it reminded me of a couple other bands, but man, this thing, I listened to it since you sent the links out to listen. I was listening right away. So anytime I got a chance. So, and on that note, I just realized today that PR sheet you sent out had an actual download link to get the files, which I was trying to do it on SoundCloud on my phone, which I was going to rant a little bit about the private SoundCloud links for like reviewers and stuff to try to actually sit down and listen is great if you have all day long where you're not leaving. Because the moment you get out of that app and you go do some other stuff and try to go back in it or quit the app, it's like it's gone. You can't get back to the private link.
Yeah.
So but I got the files now, and it comes out tomorrow, right?
Right. Well, 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Came out 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. But yeah.
One of the things that was really cool in terms of the listening experience for me, besides being a big fan of the other bands that Sorceress kind of spawned, was, these guys are like a couple years older than me. So in terms of the influences at the time, it was kind of like a trip down memory lane for me. Because I remember being like 15, probably younger even, and finding, like The Sword. And I hear a lot of The Sword in this. Mm-hmm. And Jay Massis's other band, Witch.
Yeah.
Like
the killer band.
I got that on display right here.
Yeah.
That's an obvious.
I hear the Witch, but I also hear like a lot of other stuff. But there's
I hear a lot of different material, but it's kind of that trip down, like remembering what it was like being a teenager, finding a lot of this music for the first time, and remembering the stuff that I wanted to do with my friends, and none of them were down at the time. Deathcore was the fashion at the time to be a teenage metalhead. But I thought that was really interesting. Not only that this is it's kind of like a history document for Doom. Like you've got these kids who would later go on to do like really impressive things, and they're already doing something very impressive. They wear their influences on their their shoulders while they're doing it, in my opinion. But I don't think that's a bad thing per se. That's called being a teenager and writing.
You're a fan of Mizmor and Hell, Blake, and I don't know who else here is, but are there moments in this album that show the direction they were going to go? I remember talking to Liam a little bit about some of that, and he was just like, well, we just wanted to do more extreme music all the time, and we just kind of left this in the past because we all wanted to move on to more extreme shit. But is there moments of this album that you go like, oh, I can hear a little bit of Mizmor in there, what they were trying to do?
Yeah, I can hear more of Mizmor than I can of Hell. Partially because if I remember right, Matt, who created Hell. He's the drummer on this album, so you can hear some flourishes that you're like, oh, okay, you later hear that in Hell. But one of the real things that is very jarring, especially if you're a big Mizmor fan, is hearing Liam's like really signature scream that he does, which, based off of an interview that I read with him, is actually based off of like the Nazgul, the ring wraiths in Lord of the Rings. So it's that very high pitched. I think it's actually an inhale as opposed to an exhale, which is just mind boggling to me.
It's the Roger Waters pterodactyl scream. I always think of it as
yeah.
the inhale. Like, yeah, I can't really do it, but
yeah. So
that's high pitched and like fucking harsh and screeching. It's beautiful. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's really awesome, and that's like a very signature thing in Mizmor. Like some. If there was going to be one thing that you would say, like, what is his like signature vocal trick or whatever, that one's definitely way up there. So to hear him doing that when he's like 18, 19 years old, is pretty trippy.
He kind of downplayed his singing abilities, I think, when we talked to him a little bit, and was like, I was young and I was trying to sing, and it's not really what I wanted to do or the kind of music I wanted to make, but I thought he sounded great. And you mentioned the sword. You mentioned the sword a minute ago, and I'd rather listen to this than the sword's vocals, personally.
Yeah, the vocals are awesome.
I like both, but the vocals are ridiculous. They're so good.
Yeah.
Nobody's being modest because, man, he's phenomenal.
Yeah.
But yeah, I got into Hell about, I don't know, 4 or 5 months ago, and the one album in particular. It's got a red cover. I'm not sure what it's called, but
they all have red covers, so that's not very helpful.
It's the one that starts off with like a sunken ship or something like that. There's like a playback of like a ship that's been sunk. Anyways,
yeah,
it's super heavy, like ridiculously heavy, and I don't hear any. Like I would never have put the two together personally. I love both.
I haven't listened to Hell or Mizmor. I never. When you said Hell, when I read Hell, I was thinking in my head Full of Hell, the band Full of Hell, which I used to dig those guys, a little more hardcore. But yeah, I'm not familiar with Mizmor or Hell.
Hell is pretty much the heaviest, some of the heaviest stuff I've ever heard as far as Doom goes.
Yeah.
In terms of pure like Doom, it's bludgeoning. It's claustrophobically heavy.
It's evil. It's like, because it sounds like the title, like it's like being in hell, but in a very palatable way. It's not harsh or hard to listen to at all.
And then Mizmor is blackened Doom, so you have a lot of black metal, faster tempos, tremolo picking and stuff like that, and then it slows down to just some of the most oppressively, almost not quite funeral Doom, but just slow, low, very powerful. But both bands are very thoughtful bands, I would say.
And it's interesting reading up like the band they were in before Sorceress, Love Machine. I read about. I tried my life to find material online. They released an album apparently, and I couldn't find anything.
Yeah, I think I asked Liam about that, and he said, it's not easy to track down.
Yeah, no, it's like I did a search, and there's a couple Love Machine bands that popped up. Some Canadian band album called Brighton had an album named Love Machine, and then there's some Motown single by the Miracles called Love Machine. That was the top of the search.
What you need.
I was like, yeah, they've came a long way since that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I went back and listened to Mizmor and Hell before we talked to him, and it's funny, like the progression of his musical career. I mean, it's like, you talk about a band, just knowing that the band's called Love Machine for one, and then going into Sorceress, and then Mizmor and Hell and that kind of stuff. Like, it's interesting.
Yeah, because I mean, when we talked to Liam, one of the things that he mentioned was, Love Machine had one song that kind of started coming out as like stonery Doom, and they were like, let's do that, and I was like, oh, okay, just casually just come up with this after deciding after one song that you were like,
And I believe there's a similar story to Mizmor too, isn't there? Like one of the last songs I recorded as Sorceress was supposed to be a lot heavier and more extreme, and he was like, "I'm going to make this my thing now." And
yeah.
Hmm.
So it's interesting how they took what they were doing at this time and were like, yeah, this is cool. Now let's make it more fucked up.
yeah,
That's my first song hearing this band, and it's got me blown away. Like, this is one of the top albums of for a stoner and doom mix that I've heard in years, man. And all the songs are awesome.
yeah, it's so good that it really makes you wonder like how many other albums are out there that no one knows. And we've talked about this a few times on here about, you know, like the Brown Acid series and stuff, about older stuff that is getting kind of resurfaced now. And it's like, I wonder if you could do that with just about any genre. And I'm sure you could. They're doing a heavy metal one now. I wonder if there could be some sort of like stoner metal series like that, where you go like, this album got nothing 20 years ago. Let's put it back out. Let's get people to hear it. And this is one of those albums where you're like, this is so good that there's absolutely no reason that it shouldn't be heard. I mean, there's bands that you go back and you go, oh, this was like 1995 stoner. Okay, I get that. This is not one of them. I mean, this could have came out now and you'd be like, this is fucking awesome.
Well, and it came out during the internet. So there's really like the excuse that like back in the 70s, the lost classics, if you weren't in that town, I mean, we talked about it, if you didn't have the record in your hand or hear it on the radio, you didn't know about that band.
Right.
Now, like the stoner bands or whoever that aren't real popular, like that may be lurking deeper in the underground, are still on Spotify. They're still on, like you can hear them and somebody's heard of them, but you know.
Yeah, one of the things I'd written down here was that I'm very sad that they're not still together, because I would love to see this live, man.
Yeah. I tried to poke Liam a little bit and see if there was any talk of shows, new music, some kind of like, you know, reunion of Sorceress, and it did not sound promising. That's maybe an understatement.
Yeah, it seemed pretty cut and dry.
Yeah. no interest in it.
Well, in probably like another 10 years, he's gonna start doing country. That's what they all do. They go the punk country type route.
Yeah. What do you think about that, Blake? Do you think that a doom artist can start doing country music?
Theoretically.
All right, so let's talk about some of the actual tracks. We don't do that very often on here. We kind of just talk about it in like kind of a broad sense, but I mean, I feel like every track on this is different enough. I mean, it starts off with it's called Wolves of Asgard, which is just an instrumental intro. I mean, it's long enough, it's big enough to be like more than an intro, but instrumental song. Some of the other songs I felt were like almost like teetering on like a prog metal or something. There's plenty of doom, there's plenty of stoner. So is there any tracks that anyone found stood out to them, or like a sound, a genre that stood out to them, or anything about individual tracks on this one?
I kind of said the same thing. Like the first track, that's the first one I heard when you gave us this album to listen to. I plugged on that track and I bought the album. I ordered the vinyl like before I even listened to that track. I'm like, yeah, this is rocking. And it was just building. It was like an introduction and it kept going. I was waiting for the vocals to kick in.
Yeah.
And it just kept going and building and they never hit. And I was like, is this an instrumental album? Like, I don't think so. And then song 2 hit and those vocals just like, they poured over, like, and that's where you get like that witch kind of comparison. Track 2 has that real sinister kind of vocal tone getting going and like the occult kind of doom flavor. And it just goes from there. Every track's kind of different. And
yeah, I
mean, the guitar solos like dispersed throughout each track in different spots were great. Like there was a ton of guitar work, like a heavy rock vibe going on. I mean, we say doom and all this, but it's a rock and roll record too.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
there's some killer guitar solos on this.
Yeah.
really ripping. And the fact that they're teenagers is just mind blowing. I still can't believe that they're teenagers.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd agree. Like each song is like a suite unto itself in that there's like these parts that keep building, and they're new ideas. They're not like things that are just kind of like a holdover till you get back to that other cool bit that they have. It's like they go from one cool part to another cool part to an even cooler part, and they almost never get back to that original bit because just keep. They must have been young and just so full of ideas that they had to put all of them into one song and then build this, compendium of riffs and grooves.
Yeah, really... I was going to say something similar about how one of you had mentioned that it was kind of like each song is its own little EP in a way. And I think the third track is called Of the Trees. And I think that, one of my favorites. Yeah, I was going to say probably my favorite track on it. And it starts as like this really heavy track. And then towards the end or like the middle end or something, like there's this really weird, like
trippy.
Yeah, it just goes off in this other direction, but it doesn't seem like random. I mean, it just seems like they wrote this story and that's just the way it lays out.
Yeah.
They kind of managed to do that with every song in a way. They keep,
And that's something that's another thing that you do see in Hell and Mizmor, is these kind of like suites of songs. Like neither of those bands have strayed away from writing 20-minute epic songs. And so you're seeing some of that being born with this album.
Yeah. Track 2, 9 Muses. I made note that it had like it's like one of the shorter tracks, second shortest track at almost 8 minutes. But it goes into a guitar solo like halfway through, like the 4-minute mark, and then it hits this riff at 4:50 that just like crushes you. And then it keeps going, and it leads into another completely new and different guitar solo that goes for like another 2 minutes, and it goes like all the way, and just like a face melter the whole rest of the song. So I think if I were to pick, I think 9 Muses was my track of the album, but it's different every time I listen. It's like a different song, a different part of a different song will really get to me.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Like every time I listen to the album, there's a new song that I like more than I'd like before. And like right now, Black Acid Mother is the one that I'm hooked on because it got a really chunky, groovy vibe to it. And they're all fun songs too, and they're still doomy. Like a lot of flavor to them.
Yeah.
That's certainly the most Sabbath inspired sounding track, right? Black Acid Mothers. It's got that groove.
Yeah. I wouldn't begin to be able to say what my favorite track is because there's so many parts, but in each song. But yeah, for me, I'd agree with Eddy that Black Acid Mother is the one that jumped out at me initially. But every song's a 10 out of 10 for me. Like there's no weak parts. Even there's some odd parts. I can't remember which song it was, but they go to this kind of odd, almost like fun part in the one song.
Yeah.
Of the Trees. I can't remember. Anyways, there are parts where you're like, oh, that came out of left field. I wasn't expecting that to happen, but it works. Everything works together.
And it's like even like some like weird eerie sounds in between the tracks too, and
I like all that stuff.
But it all fits pretty well with the songs too.
Yeah, I had that down. Like maybe we'll get to it as one of the things I could probably do without was the ending to almost every song was just some weird drony kind of.
See, I love that
sound bite, and people are gonna like it. But I'm like, if you could pick, like, what could they do? Like, I could live without it, but I also appreciate it. And it doesn't hurt. It's just kind of like, all right, what's going on here? I want the next track. But
how about the title track, Beneath the Mountain, the 20-minute track? Did anyone feel like that dragged? Was it a long 20 minutes or was it a pretty easy 20 minutes to get through? Because for me, I know that I always talk about the length of songs and stuff, but I felt like it was a pretty easy 20 minutes to get through. I thought it was great.
For sure. I thought the same. It's like you're starting an EP out, another EP. Like it's its own journey. So
they really are journeys. You're right. Like each one is its own album. It's like six different albums. that all work together.
But you could all tell that it's the same band, though. It's not like it's cohesive.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to share the artwork just real quick. I don't have a whole lot about it. But I know that Liam had mentioned it a little bit, like how it maybe one of his friends or something, Blake, do you remember, that had made this originally?
I think so, yeah.
His name is Kento Woolery, who made this. And, they put the album out. It was what it was. It kind of disappeared. They all went on to other things. And when they tried to like put this out again, was it maybe even on like CD years later or something like that?
I believe so.
It was like a copy of a copy that they used, and it was pixelated and low res and all this kind of stuff. But for the vinyl, they did finally track down the original art, I believe, and this is why it looks as good as it does. Thankfully, otherwise it would have been like the eighth copy of a copy, and it probably would have been a little rough. But they did eventually track it down.
Yeah, I think I read that in the PR stuff. They talked about tracking down the original art, and it was like an oil painting or something, and they did some high resolution scan to get it to bring it back for this album.
Yeah.
Which is cool. It looks like a Doom record you'd see today.
It looks like it's a little heavier than I think the album actually is.
Yeah.
Actually, I think.
And they've got the black metal kind of letters.
Yeah.
On there.
I'm assuming some of you guys ordered the vinyl. Is that?
I did.
Yeah, I figured. But you haven't. I'm assuming you haven't gotten it yet, or did you?
No.
No, okay. I was curious what the package looked like with artwork and all that kind of stuff. But
I've got high hopes.
Yeah. Anyway, Kento Woolery did that. So, is there anything else that anyone wants to bring up about this one?
One thing I want to say, it's kind of crazy. I was looking at it on YouTube, and it came out 3 years ago on YouTube, or somebody posted it. I'm not even sure who's posted it, but it has less than 700 views. It has 647 views right now, and no comments, which is just crazy, like completely mind blowing. Keep saying mind blowing, but fuck, it's mind blowing to me because
Is
I
it
think this album at some point.
blowing?
What's that?
Is it Sabathianly mind blowing?
It's Sabathianly mind blowing. I think at some point people are going to be like, "This is the underground album that no one's heard of. That is everyone's favorite fucking album." And to be at this point in knowing that it exists is kind of cool to me.
Yeah, it's so surprising that it's not a little bit more well known to me. I mean, given the circumstances, it makes somewhat sense, but usually, the best stuff does eventually make its way to the top, and it's like this is one of those albums that just never seemed to do that, and maybe now that's going to happen. Maybe now with this reissue on vinyl and stuff that'll happen, but it's always surprising. I mean, I always hear, especially in this genre of like stoner rock, stoner metal, doom, whatever, like people talking about old albums, 20-year-old albums, and it eventually makes its way around, and eventually people start grabbing onto that album. And this one's not one of them. And
so what this album is going to pick up, I guarantee you, tomorrow it releases on Bandcamp. It has tomorrow's date as the release date. There's going to be people thinking it came out right now.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And that's okay. That's okay. I guarantee you that this will get votes for the Doom charts. Which
it was a little confusing because they released like a single, and it's like, well, this album's already been out for 15 years. Like, unnecessary to release a single, but they're kind of doing it like it's a new album, which is probably the right way to do it because people need to look at it that way.
Absolutely. It's getting the PR, the everything right now to put it out, and hopefully people pick it up. But that could be one thing too that hurt them back then is I don't know what kind of like marketing or PR or people their contacts who
They did, man.
if they even tried, they just might not have even put any effort into trying to get people to hear it.
Well,
Yeah.
I think it could almost be a fun little science experiment of sorts to like set an alarm 3 months from now. Fuzz Club is out, interviews are out, releases are out. How many views now? How many shares now? How much buzz now? And then talk to the band again and say, is there any chance of getting back together now? Because I really feel like those numbers are going to escalate. So
I tried to push him on that same sentiment. Was like, what if this album just blows up? Like, any chance then? And it didn't sound like it.
Well, what's funny is they're all still really good friends.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like there's some kind of like interpersonal.
No, it's just
Dude,
like
walking
lack
out.
of interest in this type of music for them. This just isn't their thing.
Yeah, they're just kind of over it.
Yeah.
It makes me very sad.
Yeah.
Let's do that.
It's not too late. They could grow back into it too.
Yeah,
Let's
they'll
hope it.
get tired of playing like as heavy as possible.
Yeah, you think you would get tired of that like eventually. I think probably do physically. Like bands tend to slow down a little bit when they age some, but
Well, and we talked lyrically with him a little bit, and how his like Mizmor and stuff is such a like personal project, and it's just like he pours it all out in those things, whereas this album was more about like Blake, I don't, maybe you remember exactly what it was about, but like nerd shit, whatever it was.
Nerd shit. It's Lord of the Rings and like mythology.
Yeah, and he was like, I wasn't writing about much. I mean, there's personal things kind of intertwined in it under this like Lord of the Rings package, and it's got to be easier to do that than just like pour your heart and soul into things constantly. I mean, to just write about Lord of the Rings or something, I would assume it could be a little bit of a break. So maybe he'll get tired of pouring himself out like that every time.
yeah, for sure.
Well, anything else?
So I mentioned the band Sorceress, and I don't know if it's a direct comparison, but it's just this album, and I don't want to detract from Sorceress, but I wanted to put that out there because I went back today. I went down the Sorceress rabbit hole, and I've got a record behind me, and they were one of the bands that first like stoner rock heavy bands that I just felt like nobody knew about, and they were just fucking amazing. And every album they've put out is superb. And if you don't know about them, you should check them out.
I don't think that I do. It's called Solar.
Yeah. So they put an album out called Further was their debut. Then an album called 13. Then 2010 was AD, which is this one you see behind me. It's kind of a double LP. It's like their magnum opus record. And then they came back with the album, I think that Blues Funeral Records put it out in 2019. They got back together and released another album, and it was pretty cool too.
Nice.
But it's got a lot of similar like elements. It's a heavy stoner rock sound, like pretty aggressive, but has that rock and roll kind of soloing and the stoner kind of groove to it. But
So one thing I wanted to mention was that, like, despite the heaviness, the evilness, the stoner and the doom stuff, it still has this kind of, it still swings like fucking great. Like, it really has a great rhythmic feel, and it has a boogie feel to it, where it's like you could dance to these tracks, kind of. You can rock out to them, but they're still evil and like they got enough doom in there for me.
Yeah.
So I really dig all those, and the playing like is really like head and shoulders above most bands in the genre, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Like the Hell of Mizmor stuff I've heard, the playing doesn't really shine like it does on this album. I'm sure that it's technically what it needs to be for that stuff, for Mizmor and Hell, but this stuff, man, they're fucking ripping. Like, they're playing really well.
Yeah, they're playing fast too.
Super fast and tight.
Even
And
the bass,
they don't get too fast for their own good. They're great.
Eddie, you said they're bass player?
yeah, the bass is just right in there too, right in the pocket, like
mhm.
drums, and also like doing like the lead stuff with the guitar sometimes, and fills it all in really good.
Yeah, Liam was the bassist and the vocalist.
That's what I was gonna say. Was he was the bassist, right, and the vocalist, and he was ripping. The bass is amazing. Like it's
three-piece?
throughout the whole thing.
4-piece.
4-piece. Okay.
2 guitars, or
I believe so, yeah.
So if there are 4 guys, 2 guys, one in Hell, one in Mizmor, what are the other 2 doing?
So Andrew Black is on this album. He does like ambient music, but he's also the live bassist for both Mizmor and Hell. And then the last member, who I believe his name is Blake Farram. I don't know if he still makes music or not.
I'm assuming he was a guitarist or something.
Yeah, I think Andrew and him were the guitarists. I think.
Yeah, I know so little. I know nothing about the band, and I barely know the songs. But this is my new favorite band. I think of the next little while. I think I'm going to be delving pretty deep into this album.
We should mention that it's coming out on King Volume. King Volume was nice enough to give us that link to check it out and get this episode together and hook us up with Liam and all that kind of stuff. So shout out to them. That was cool.
Thank you, King Volume.
Yeah.
Yeah, and looking at their Bandcamp, they've got quite a bit of support, like on the pre-order for that. I don't know if it's the same site. I get the impression that the whole album was available to stream for a while on Bandcamp, and
it was on like Mizmor and Hell,
because there's reviews up like, oh, this album's great, and I'm like, fuck, I got here too late. But tomorrow it should be turned back on, I imagine, or 2 weeks ago it turned back on.
Yeah.
So,
all right. Well, I think that's probably pretty good, unless anyone's got anything else. We got the split episode, so I think we got plenty. But any final comments? Any final thoughts on this one?
Great fucking album, man.
Yep.
Is your mind blown?
Bathianly.
All right.
I just want to say, if you're a sorceress, I've never heard of a sorceress quitting, so that just means the band's still together. So whatever. My opinion.
Valid argument.
I want to get my hands on their first band, Love Machine.
Yeah.
2006, 2007. It kind of sounded like it was like more in this territory than the Mizmor route. Like
I get the feeling that maybe he doesn't want people to hear that kind of stuff.
Yeah. It seemed very like, no, you will not hear that.
Yeah. I was not. I looked. I was like, where the fuck? Like, I'm so used to everything being online now. It's so you find a band that you can't find online, you're like, what the fuck, man? Like,
right. Like it must be intentional. If you can't find something, it has to be intentional.
Yeah. So.
Although I do really enjoy the fact that you just said you wanted to get your hands on their Love Machine.
Yeah, there you go.
All right, let's go around. Everyone can tell everybody what they're up to. Bucky, you want to lead us off again?
All right. Well, 2 weeks ago, the Doom charts for February came out tomorrow as we record it. So the new monthly chart should come out. So it's going to be, I mean, it was a stacked month.
It was a great
February.
month. Lots of good stuff.
Yeah. And that's really all I got. I'm just going to be poking around. Find me on Twitter, on Instagram, and Bandcamp. So gobbling up records over there. So
cool. Aawks?
We head out on the road on March 8th into Quebec. We're going to hit up Ottawa, then Montreal, then Quebec City, then Sherbrooke. About 2,200 kilometers, or maybe that's 1 mile in American.
I don't know. Don't ask me what that means.
Many liters of gas will go into our cars.
We get to join our French brothers of Sons of Arrakis and a bunch of other really cool bands. So if you check out our socials, maybe go check out all their music and have some fun, and maybe just keep commenting about how we want Sorceress to come back together. So I'm just going to keep putting that out there.
Eddy?
Laura's just stepping back in the groove of things here pretty soon, and the Endless is hitting the studio this summer for recording our debut album, and I'm still working on some stuff on my own, trying to learn how to play the saz and a couple instruments.
And dude, you're a fucking talented painter. Holy shit.
That too, yeah.
yeah, that's sweet.
I'm doing my first landscape here now.
Nice.
It's awesome. Blake?
A lot in the pipeline on the second album. We'll have some more announcements about that within the month or so.
Cool. All right. We'll catch y'all on the next one.